Howdy, I'm the Last Knife Fighter. It's a rainy day in North Texas. Looking for some conversation. Didn't know anybody else to call other than the Converse Cowboy. So, again, I'm the Last Knife Fighter, and I'm taking over the conversation.
The Converse Cowboy journey has given me an opportunity to sit down with some amazing performers that are living the Western lifestyle, where it is my job to tease out their habits and routines so that you can apply and test yourself in your own life. I've learned, I've grown personally, I've been enlightened, and I've been humbled. Above all, I realize that there is no destination in this life, no goal achieved or money made that can replace the feeling of flow and the pursuit of doing what you love to do. With a growth mindset, I'm constantly asking questions and pursuing knowledge. The Converse Cowboy is a platform that allows me to do just that. I'm excited and eager to share their stories with you all. I'm Mike Roberts. This is the Converse Cowboy. Brought to you by Kerry Kelly Bits and Spurs and Schaefer Outfitter.
Mike, is it?
Yeah, that is my, government name is Michael, but yeah.
Oh, okay, good to know, Michael. A little bit longer than Mike. Mike, I had you over here today, not only because we are somewhat new acquaintances, but even newer friends. I mean, can you agree with that as well?
No, yeah, definitely. I would say it's much more than an acquaintance, and I'm happy to call you a friend, and glad that you invited me in and had us out here at the Lone Hand Ranch. So,
well, the feeling is mutual.
Yep.
And as you know, what we do out here at the Lone Hand Ranch is it is a chicken, poultry, mostly egg-laying type of farm, but it's also a thought farm. And I think that you engaged and understood what that was early on in our conversations.
Yeah.
So again, what are we doing out here? We're not here to lay eggs. We're here to have a conversation first and foremost, and then also have a little couple thoughts and ideas that might be interesting to the public, might not be. And if it isn't, again, as Mike Tyson famously said, turn off your station, change your channel, right? But hopefully everybody's in it to win it here and wants to know a little bit about Mike. I surely did. I think we're going to find out some new things about Mike, the guy who is selflessly been behind the notepad in a lot of ways in order to bring out people that you all love and enjoy, what they're all about. So that's what we're going to try to do here today with Mike. Michael, I should say, right here, Michael. What really was the whole... Let's get into this, first of all. Where are you from? What are you about? Mm-hmm. And we're talking very young age, so go really from the roots here if you can.
Yeah, you bet. Born and raised in Monroe, Louisiana. And, I'm going to fast forward, skip through some things, but...
You don't have to.
But so, yeah, born and raised Monroe, Louisiana. Grew up playing baseball. That's all I really knew, all the way through college, and so college allowed me to go a number of different ways and lived in different places. And like I said, I played ball in college up in Kansas, and then went down to Nichols State, graduated from Nichols State, and then from there, and I'll back up. I'll dive in a little bit more on that. So, like I said, all I knew all of my life was baseball, right? And that was my why, that was my drive. I didn't know anything else existed. And then, I got done playing ball and reality hit. It's like, well, what do you do now? Like everything that I'd ever lived for was stripped away, it was taken away, as most people do. I mean, you play ball, and I think a scout told me once, 1,500 kids will get drafted this year, and 15 of those will go on and play in the big leagues. So even if I were to have gotten drafted, it would have still been a long road. And I saw a lot of buddies go down that road, and it didn't work out for them. But I'm getting long-winded on that.
What I think you're getting at is that was your identity for a long time, especially in your adolescence.
Yeah.
And at the end of something like that, which I think a lot of people can attest to, especially in sports, is that you had a bit of an identity crisis on your way out of it. maybe even during it, when in fact you were Mike the ball player.
Yeah, for sure. It's like, once you're told you can't play anymore, it's like, okay. And I kind of was. Like, I was kind of burnt out at that time. Like, I could have went and played some independent ball and went ahead and fight the fight, I guess. But I was ready. I was broke, right? Like, I'm a college kid. I didn't have a job. Like, I'm flat broke, and I was ready to make money. I saw my buddies going out and making money, and so that appealed to me. I wanted to start acquiring things on my own, and so I had some buddies that got into pharmaceutical sales, and so I immediately started going down that road, and I'd set up these interviews, and I'd go and pretty much get laughed at by the people I was getting interviewed by. I went to the Joseph A. Banks and got me a nice suit and showed up to these things, and I'm interviewing against other candidates that were 15 years in vacuum sales or, some hardcore B2B sales.
Sure.
And so at one point during one of these interviews, I was like, okay, look, this is clearly not going well, right? We can both agree, to the guy across the table, and he's like, I would agree. I was like, well, tell me this. Give me
Well,
some.
he did agree.
Yeah. I was like, give me some advice. He's like, you're a smart kid, and we like you, but how do we know you are what you say you are? And I was like, look, man, I'm telling you, like, I'm driven. I'm going to do this. I'm going to figure it out. I had my whole pitch down, and he wasn't buying it, and fair enough, for good reason. I was 23 years old at the time, 24, and
You ain't shit.
yeah, and so I'm like, what do I need to do? You tell me, what do I need to do to be able to pass your test, really? And so he's like, go get some sales experience and then come back. I was like, okay, specifically then, what kind of sales? And he's like, we like to see somebody business to business, proven sales experience, go out, get your teeth knocked out, a little bit, and then come back. And so I did. I started interviewing for office supply sales, like business to business, and so that's what I did. I landed a gig in Dallas and sold office supplies, and I fucking hated it. Like, it was terrible, but after that, or during that actually, I was steadily interviewing and sending my resume out every single day. Like, I had my little vision board, I've been into like mental imagery and visualization and the law of attraction, and so I manifested that into my reality. And so I did. I finally landed a gig, not long. I think I only did the office supply thing for about a year, and learned a lot. I did get my teeth kicked in, and in Dallas. It was a new area. I didn't know anybody, and but again, like I was very driven, and that was my goal at the time, and mainly motivated by money. Like that was it. I didn't know any different. I was just wanting to make more money.
It's a good place to start when you have nothing else, right? So if it's not passion behind it, of course, yeah, U.S. currency. Go get that, right, in order to give yourself a little bit more room for your passion, which at the time was not even known to you.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm a big fan of that. You said, basically positive affirmations is what kind of kept you going. You're not alone in that. And I think you're not alone in that, and a lot of successful people that do utilize that approach. Are you still using that today?
Yeah, still using that today. And I'll go back a little further. Like when I was a kid, I always had problems sleeping. I would always have these fucked up thoughts that would come to mind, and my dad would come in and check on me and be like, you all right? Aren't you sleeping? I was like, I can't sleep. He's like, look, just think good thoughts. He didn't know what he was doing. Like, he didn't know about positive thinking or the law of attraction. He didn't know about any of that, but like that stuff sank in, and I would do it. I would just start thinking about positive things laying in my bed, and before I knew it, I was asleep.
Wow.
And so even into college, like I would visualize playing ball. I can remember playing we were going into a weekend at LSU, and I can remember seeing myself at bat at Alex Box Stadium. I was leading off. In my mind, I hit a home run. In reality, I hit a double off the wall. Regardless, it was the same pitch. Like, I saw it very clearly, and it was very unreal, or very surreal, I should say. And so yeah, to answer your question, I still do that today. And after college, funny enough, I don't think I read a book until I got out of college, and I started diving into more of that stuff. One of the first books I read about that was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And so that opened my eyes up to a whole new world, and there's people talking about that stuff today. But today, there's actually data behind it, how our brain is essentially plastic, neuroplasticity, you know, and you can change your future with your thoughts.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure. You can definitely change, and you maybe you can agree with this. You can definitely change your now with your thoughts. I mean, that really is your reality, right? Your thoughts. So, great place to start, right? Is the right now. And I'm going back to this a little bit before we get too ahead of ourselves. Is that the weight of a father's words, you know? And you go back to it, and you might be thinking, this guy just wants to get some sleep.
Yeah.
You know, and he's talking to his son, his scared son, about whatever. And whatever those fucked up thoughts that you were having, it was the fire that it was easily put out by a father's words. And that was, what was it again that your father said? Think good.
He was like, just think good thoughts.
Think
happy
good thoughts. And
That's
how
so simple.
easy is that, you know, at the time of, with your Play-Doh mind at the time as being a kid, it makes a lot of sense. And clearly it did you a great deal of service, you know, on that. And so you said that you're using it today. You said you used it back then. But going back a little bit more to your sports thing and the segue out of it, was there, in fact, going back to what we talked about, an identity crisis a little bit? Who you're Mike the ball player, and then all of a sudden you're Mike the fill in the blank, right?
Yeah.
And how did that go for you?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I would like to ask that to other athletes, whether they get to the end of their collegiate career or whether they get to the end of their pro career. I think everybody deals with it at a certain point, you know. And for me, like I said, that was all that I knew, and even into, so you go into sales and you go and I finally made my way into the pharmaceutical thing, and it was like chasing the carrot. You know, it wasn't until long ago where I had another realization, and I'll get to that in a minute, but like I was just chasing a carrot, and no matter what I did, it never quenched that thirst. No matter how much money I made, I was like, oh, okay, if I just make this much money, then I'll be good. Or if I just get this pharmaceutical job, I'll be set, you know? And I mean, really, any pharmaceutical rep out there will tell you they work about 20 hours a week. You get a 6-figure salary, you get a company car, and life can be good, whatever good is to you, but that still like wasn't enough for me. Like,
Did you see a lot of the people that you saw for a short time in the industry in pharmaceutical sales that their job was their life and they had nothing outside of that? Or did you see more? So I should say there's 3 different ways I see it, at least. I'm spitballing here, but there's the one that does their job in order to make it a little simpler, does their job for the weekend, right? Then there's the second person that does their job because they love it. There is no weekend. The job is their weekend, you know? And there's the third person that is always staying in the weekend and therefore doesn't progress in their job because they're only concerned about their passion or the weekend or whatever I said.
Yeah.
You know, you were young as well. So out of those 3, where were you?
Yeah, so, gosh, it's hard to think back that far to know exactly where my mindset was, but I was happy to have the job. I think what I lacked then was gratitude. Like, I wasn't grateful for what I had because for some reason I thought that meant that I was complacent. Like, I thought that meant like, oh, okay, I'm satisfied. That means I can't keep growing, which is totally delusional.
That's what you felt back then?
Yeah, at least that's me thinking about that looking back.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's tough to get back in
because
your
I
brain.
never had the feeling of satisfaction. Like, yeah, okay, well, fast forward. Like, I was in pharmaceuticals for 12 years, and I get married to the pretty girl. Her family has a very successful business. We have a new house, 300 acres of land. Like, that's the American dream, right, to most people. But I wasn't happy, and I think it was because it was like the social conditioning of like, I got to this point in my life, I'm 30 years old, I got a good job, what's the next step? According to society, it's to get married, and then you have children and that whole thing. So I think I may have rushed that process, you know, of I don't want to, I guess the word is settling maybe, or thinking that was what I was supposed to do. You know what I mean?
And because of that, do you feel like you were robbed of some time of your own self-exploration?
No, I wouldn't say I was robbed. With the mindset I have now, like all of that had to happen, right? Like it all happened as it was supposed to. I don't think I was robbed of anything.
Yeah. Well, it's
know?
easy now to look back. I'm asking you as where you were as a younger Mike in that. Did you feel that feeling for even the slightest second that, hey, I'm actually being kind of robbed of a little of experience because I did. This is all great. This is all great. You know, obviously we're kind of set up. We're all about each other. But man, you know what? I'm somewhat of a young man and I never really went out and got, and maybe I'm missing something. Did that ever cross your mind? And again, you're going back in a kid's mind.
Yeah.
But did it ever cross it to say, man, you know what? I might have fucking rushed into something here. Not to say it's not great, but
No, are you talking about marriage in particular? Or?
just, you know, marriage and the whole setup that you alluded to is that, you know, things are great. Some people get married and they're still in poverty.
Yeah,
Others get married and things are really set up and great. And that
Yeah.
it looks like that was what you were dealing with.
No, yeah, I know what you're talking about, but no, I don't feel robbed. Like I didn't feel robbed then, and I had a thought, it just eluded me. But no, okay, so I guess it was like I was so persistent, like my mind was so focused on that particular goal, and like I think I had like blind persistence. Totally unaware. All the signs, like looking back, it's easy to see, right? But all the signs led me, or were trying to say, no, motherfucker, like this isn't right. You know, like this is not your path right now, you know? And for whatever reason, like my determination and my persistence just kept going. And again, just totally unaware and blinded to the whole situation of what it was. Again, I don't feel robbed today. I think it all had to happen.
Yeah.
It led me on the path that I'm on now.
Sure, absolutely. And again, I guess where I'm really trying to dig into more of anything is not on top of the hill where clearly you are at right now.
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Well, no, as far as your adolescence, you know, I think we should all be a little bit on top of that hill looking down at who we were as kids.
Yeah.
Especially in these moments in our later teens and 20s especially. And I want to ask, do you ever think that in that point when you were that guy, which you no longer are, and tomorrow you'll be a different man as well, were you ever judgmental, you know, to your peers, you know, all the while putting more pressure on yourself to do something that is meaningful? When you had all of everything going, or what would be said going in people's eyes, were you looking at your peers at that point at all, and at any point being judgmental that you now look back on and say, hey, what the fuck? You know, I was giving people a hard time without even knowing what a hard time is, or what it takes to even be somewhat knowledgeable. Were you doing that? Everybody, I'm interested in that, is that were you at one point, which you no longer are as far as what I know, judgmental to the peers around you of not seeking out more, you know, of higher intellect, you know, that kind of space?
Yeah, for sure. 100%. And I think how we judge ourselves is how we judge everything. And so I was very judgmental to myself. I was my own worst critic. And of course, like I didn't realize it at the time, totally unaware of just that, like being judgmental of people around me, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's no way to grow doing that, right? And I can tell right now from again, I want to make it very clear that I've known Mike for, you know, maybe 4 months here, but I do buy into what you're doing. You know, and it takes a special person, at least to me, to do that, where you are in pursuit of knowledge. Certainly not the answer, because that would be a futile endeavor. But I want to know the young Mike, and I think that we found that out, at least for the most part. I certainly feel like I have, is that very torn, certainly not misguided person, but conflicting views. I mean, you're literally conflicting yourself. You know, a lot of times when, again, you're in your 20s more than anything.
Yeah, and I'll sum that up, right? So grew up playing baseball, very competitive. I fucking hated school, like C student at best. The only reason I went to college was to play baseball. The only reason I finished college was because I played baseball. And, you know, with competition, like there's external validation, you know, and like it's all results based. Like, what is the outcome? Did you win? Did you lose? Did you strike out? Did you hit home runs? What was your batting average, right? And so I totally like bought into all of that. And that's somewhat of a metaphor, like for everything in life, like seeking external validation. Same thing when I got into sales, right? Like, did you hit your number this quarter? And that's something that I think today, like there's a balance, like is this ego? I think ego can be healthy in some instances as long as you have massive awareness around it and realize when ego is taken over and you got to get a tight grip on the reins and pull back to realize it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But that was the thing driving me then, was ego. I wanted, you know, it's very narcissistic, people to like me. And I think as human nature, that's what we want. We want people to like us, especially in a sales environment. You're pretty much judged and your performance is based off of, do people like you? Because people want to buy from people they like, you know?
Sure. Talking about sales, jeez. That's different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you do that? Have you ever sold anything?
Oh, I've sold a lot, yeah. From the easier to sell to the hardest to sell. And what I've realized is it's no matter what you're doing, I think that even product-wise, you really are selling yourself, right? And so that's the toughest thing. Mm-hmm. And when you don't truly buy into yourself, God, that's a tough product to sell. I will say this, though, or will ask you this, is that you got Mike, right? And then you have the ego, right? As in everybody, including myself or whatever, these are two Jekyll and Hydes here.
Yeah.
You know? But really, what does drive, again, you said the validation. So to me, what I see is validation, it's very key, but I don't know if Mike is wanting that or the ego behind Mike, you know?
Right.
Is it the very vulnerable Mike or person behind that? Or is it the ego? Because the ego, to me, protects the Mike, you know?
I agree.
And so I think, and I'll answer my own question, what I think is that Mike requires the validation, not the ego. The ego is to protect itself from getting validation, right? Mm-hmm. And so throughout our younger years, yes, we want the fucking feedback, whether it be from your father, from your mother, from your coach, from your teacher. You want that, and that's Mike that wants that, not the ego. And again, I say the ego as a derogatory thing because it is, where you put this thing on and you don't need validation. You negate the validation in order to say, hey, we're good here. I'm fucking Mike. You know, no, I'm not just Mike. I'm fucking Mike, you know? And so at least that's how I felt like when I was a kid. That's where I come to the realization of that. Yeah. The validation is only starved, you know, or the ego is only starved by the validation, you know, type of deal. So, so it's comforting to hear something like that, especially out of the sports world. I appreciate that. And I hope that there's a lot of people that aren't well into their 30s, maybe even further than that, even beyond that are still dealing with that. I think you know who you are. But it is...
fuck, man, that's everybody. I not everybody, but that is the majority. That's the majority of people, you know?
But you should be able to leave that behind at some point. And if you haven't, people that love you are suffering from it. If you are the guy that is living out of the best parts of your life, being in a high school, and God forbid a sport, right? You know, you're robbing your loved ones, and let's just go right to a spouse or whatever, of like knowing you. Because you're so stuck behind the ego and not whatever your first government name is. You know? Yeah. So I think we broke that down right away. Yeah. And so anybody listening should know, check yourself and understand that if you are unhappy with the way that everything worked out at a younger age, especially sports, that's a quick evaluation that you should do. And there's probably going to be a couple lumps that you got to swallow. But it's not ours to swallow at all. We have our own to do so. So Where do you find yourself now? Obviously, in this great search at mile marker 50 out of 1,000, where do you find yourself now, comfortability-wise, and what is just the day-to-day getting up? What are you going for?
Yeah, that's a good question too. It's like, I'll go back a little bit. Like, all of that stuff had to happen for a reason. Like, that going through a separation led me down a different path, right? Like, I fought it, but I couldn't. There were times where, like, I couldn't find the tears. You know what I mean? It was like I couldn't. Like, I felt like I needed
T-I-E?
tears
T-E-A.
that come out of your eyeballs.
Oh, those.
Yeah. Couldn't
Those are
find
the worst.
I couldn't find the tears, right? And I was like, why? Why can I not cry? Like, I wanted to cry because of what was going on and separating from my wife. Like, I was of the old school mentality. Like, you get married, you stick it out, and you make it work no matter what. Yeah. And luckily, I'm grateful for her courage to say, no, motherfucker, like, this shit ain't working. You're not happy, and I'm not happy, you know? And so we were married for 5 years, and about a year, really, it shouldn't have happened, really. Like, that's why I was saying, like, there were signs screaming at me that it shouldn't have happened. But so
the start of it, or the...
Yeah, all of it, man. I'm telling you.
None of it should have happened.
Looking back now, yeah, there were signs that said no, 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 no. But again, blind persistence got in my way. And anyway, so I ended up separating. I'm living in an apartment for 6 months by myself, and I was fucking in a dark place, right? Like, there were days I didn't even want to come out from under the covers. I didn't want to see anybody. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I'd go to do my job very poorly. And then I'd come back to my little apartment.
Well, you say poorly, why? Because you weren't into it?
Because my head was fucked up. My head was in...
An apartment's a terrible place to live.
Yeah.
I think for men like us, people like us, space is a big thing.
Yeah.
And when you're sleeping somewhere and 10 foot away from you, you know, whether you know it, 10 foot away from you, there's another heartbeat in there.
Yeah.
You know, going through the same lonely apartment shit that you might be going through.
Yeah.
You can't get your own space. And again, when we grew up, again, with this, you know, this type of, and again, I'll be the first one to say, I am no cowboy. You know what I mean? But I will say that lonesomeness and loneliness is a huge part of growth. And if you neglect that in any way, which I think cowboy lifestyle for sure will innately get you involved in that.
Yep, I think there's a difference. There's a big difference in being alone and being lonely. And it's a mindset, it's a choice, it's a perception. But where I was at that time, I chose to be lonely, unconsciously, right? Like, I wasn't aware of any of it. I just was questioning why. Why the fuck is this happening? I don't understand any of it. And still with this hope that we would get back together. But
when did that die? Hope is a fucking crazy thing. It's obviously it's kin to faith. Yeah. You know, and it's usually blindly led. Yeah. Right? Until something of weight hits you. Yeah. Now, if you're a Christian, and I'm a big fan of religion, if you're a Christian, if an alien comes down and sits down in Aurora, Texas, which might have happened, it didn't happen, they disproved it, then where does your faith go? In something like this, where the relationship, you have a lot of hope, you have a lot of things like that, when you both look into each other's eyes and understand that, hey, this is really somewhat run its course, and we just don't, we like each other. Yeah. But man, it ain't quite that deep. This is a very shallow endeavor. Yeah. How does that affect your hope? And after bastards making hope a bastard, right? How do you ever obtain it again for anything else? So I like the phrase "hope is not a strategy," and like at that time, like I was just numb. I was callous. Like I chose to be that way, right? Like that's how I dealt with it. That's how I coped with it. We did the counseling stuff and all of that. And anyway, I'll speed this up, but like. That's where I was at. I was numb to everything. I didn't want to fucking be around anybody. I ended up getting another place. I'm in real estate. I'm a real estate investor. And so I bought this other place
another ranch, and it was either going to be an investment if we worked this thing out, or it was going to be where I lived. And so today that's where I live, the Hidden Valley Ranch. And so I went on this soul searching journey. I started trying to figure out what is it? What am I missing, right? So I was in pharmaceuticals, and I would sit down with doctors. I would ask them to go to lunch with me one-on-one or breakfast, the ones that I knew very well. And I would ask, like, man, do you ever just wonder, like, are you doing what you're supposed to be doing? Like, or do you actually love what you're doing? Or like, how do you know your why? Like, how do you know? I was just searching for answers, right? Like I was asking anybody I could.
Asking the wrong guy, maybe.
Yeah, maybe, but I was asking questions, and I was just curious, and I would read books, I signed up for this deal with a guy named Aubrey Marcus. He started a deal called Fit for Service, and it was a year long. Aubrey owns On It down in Austin. And it was 100 people, and we got together for a year, and we go to 4 different summits, and we congregated via Instagram, and that year alone, man, that was probably the biggest year of personal growth for me. It lifted me out of that dark place that I was in.
Right.
And it just opened my eyes to, I don't know, like, what are we doing here? Like, what is it to be a human being? Like, it's not this 9-to-5 thing that I've been doing. It's not what I've been socially conditioned to believe. Like, and so, like, no question is ever answered. Each question's answer just led to another question for me, And so I got heavy into meditation and journaling and really trying to figure out how this fucking thing operates, how this brain of mine operates that every one of us has. It runs 24/7, and you can't stop it. Like, it's going to keep going. But you can become more mindful. You can become more aware of what your thoughts are, like where are they coming from, find more center, find out whatever your truth is. And so that's what that year did for me. And then this whole Converse Cowboy thing, it didn't have a name at that time, but I was like, man, I'm really into horses. Like I married into the horse thing and got big into just horsemanship and wanting to understand horses. And so I kind of used this as a platform to seek answers, to scratch my own itch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I actually had one of the first guys I sat down with was James Payne. He's a cutting horse trainer, and now he trains my horses. And one day we were riding around, and he's like, "Man, why do you do the podcast?" And I was like, "Well, would you have sat down with me for an hour and answered every single question that I had in its entirety?" And he's like, "Okay, good point."
That's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of the short synopsis of what got me to where I am today, and reading right out of the gate. Several books led me down the path that I'm on now.
Yeah. Well, it makes a ton of sense from what I gathered to do that in search of your own answers, which I think is extremely noble to do that. And also, I think in the Western style and everything that we know and love of what a cowboy is and what that individual has to offer the world. Mm-hmm. To go and interview guys like that, that's how you find it, because it is so reserved. This is a man or a profession or a woman, for that matter, without an outlet, and what a crazy thing it is to uncork that, and if, which I believe you are, somebody who can completely take that and fill up your own glass with. I mean, you're gonna be a dude by default, whether you like it or not, over a certain period of time. So I think that from the outside looking in, I think you grab the right demographic and the right people to try to learn something from. Other than myself, that is. But well, starting out, there was a lot of resistance. I've never hosted a podcast. I've never. At that point, I was so I want to say into myself, but it was more like I'm an introvert by nature, right? I'm fine with being alone at my ranch. That's where I'm most comfortable. But I knew that I needed to lean more into uncomfortable. It just kept coming up in meditations and in while I would journal.
that kept coming out, like, oh shit, that's where the growth's at, like it's so simple to see now, but like the more uncomfortable situations I can put myself in, I'm going to be able to have more personal growth, right? And so I was talking with a buddy from Austin, and he had his own podcast, very, very small scale, but he's like, dude, just do the next step. And I was like, what do you mean? He's like, well, what's the next step to get started? He's like, you've been talking about this for 6 months. I was like, I don't know, like get some equipment. And he's like, there you go, order some equipment. Yeah. He's like, you order the equipment and then you just do the next step. I was like, okay. So I got back home and I got online and I reached out to a few people. They recommended some equipment and I ordered it. Yeah. And then I bump into a buddy, and this is like the law of attraction. This is how it works. I bump into a buddy and tell him this idea, and he's like, man, I've been kind of wanting to get behind the camera and film some stuff, and so that just kind of lined up, and I reached out to a friend of mine, and I had the first interview lined up, and then off we went with a lot of fear and a lot of resistance, but I was, I'd started. I started doing the thing, and so that is what I have to constantly remind myself of, right? Like lean into the uncomfortable, be open, be vulnerable. Like 3 years ago, there's no way I could have sat in front of a camera and just spilled out all of my, inner thoughts and the shit that I thought people would judge me for. Like
You've seen a lot of people do it by now, though.
Well, it's like my mindset now is I'm okay with it, man. Like if you want to judge me, like I'm okay with it. That's fine. Like you're not my people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I'm fine with my truth and what aligns with that. If you want to get on board with it, I mean, I welcome you with open arms. But if you don't, I don't judge you for it. But like we're just not aligned, and that's something that took me a lot of years to understand. And that I think that thought alone helped me overcome the narcissism that I had. And again, like that's a practice. I'm human by nature. Like of course we want people to like us, but like the daily practices of journaling and meditating and all of the other things that I do help me stay aligned with what I think is true to me at that time.
Absolutely. I think that even when I met you and you were well on your way with your project or whatever, and I've been in so many industries, including the one that I'm currently in, that is overwhelmed by narcissism. I didn't see that. I didn't see that in you. I saw a guy that was that had a thirst for knowledge, and then why not go into the people instead of the literature? I was fascinated by that because obviously I was kind of grown up on the literature, to go into that, and being raised out here, only child type of deal. That's all I could really delve in. I knew my folks, and I knew that they were dead serious people. But I never got anything out of them as far as from a peer type of standpoint. Mm-hmm. So I think that your project with the Converse Cowboy, to me, which I've always been interested in, is only because the guests that you have on and who you are meshes so well in order to get whatever is learned out. And my goodness, if that isn't the fucking key, to do anything. So
I want to mention something though, if I may.
Please do.
So like, you don't know what you don't know, and then like, you start taking these steps and aligning with truth, and the law of attraction takes over, and it's a mindset. It's how you think. Like we can, as human beings, we can create our future. And so where I was trying to take the show and what I was wanting to do, the guys behind the camera just so happened to show up. And this is a guy that I played Little League ball with, and I never talked to him since then. I think we were 7, and I never saw or talked to him since then. And we lived in the same town, and then all of a sudden I had heard a rumor that he was doing this videography thing and was pretty good at it. His dad had a hunting show and did that deal, so he dug his heels in pretty early into what his career path would be. But man, I just want to express my gratitude, because those guys and what they can do from a production standpoint is far beyond what I ever could have anticipated. I mean, it's professional. I mean, what they bring to the table, like And not only from behind the cameras, but I call he's a friend now, you know, and so again, like that wouldn't have happened if this show wasn't around.
Yeah.
And so that, like, the thing that I lean hard into now is gratitude, and I think it's everywhere. It's a lot easier to find when you look for it.
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that early on in my life, like I didn't.
Now, is this
I
a
didn't-
single individual that is helping you on that? Or?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, Plugged In Creative is the name of the company, and they're out of Monroe, Louisiana. And I just feel fortunate that we're in the same hometown, and we get to do this thing together. So, I would feel remiss if I didn't mention that and express my gratitude for them and what those guys do. And I feel like they clean up a lot of my mess. They make me look a lot better than what I probably should be on camera, and so for that I'm grateful.
Absolutely. And do you know these one or two assholes' names?
Yeah, the guy I played Little League ball with is Andy Chasen.
Gotcha. And now, is Andy in the room right now?
He may or may not be in the room right now.
Well, I'm a big fan of Andy. I can
Yeah.
say that right now. And the other individual that's involved?
Montana Huckabee.
What a name! Unbelievable. Montana Huckabee, that's made up.
For some reason, I always wanted to call him Dakota. I don't know why.
Well, let that go and go with what go with what you know.
Yeah.
For sure. But no, to speak on that, yes, the production quality of anything that you've done has been pretty 4.5, maybe even 5-star.
Yeah, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I understand with that, and who else to encapsulate, kind of the greatness and knowledge that a lot of people that you have interviewed in other than these two boys. So we will do a special hat tip to the boys, and I hope they're doing well wherever they are.
So guys, this has been fun. It was different having the tables turned on me, being in the hot seat, but I'd like to thank my friend, The Last Knife Fighter, not only for having us out, but for also allowing us to use his music for the show. I'm very grateful for that, and so he's going to play it out for us to close the show.
I was born on a Sunday, but the sun didn't shine. I was banned and cast away, but men like me don't mind. Lost my smile and found this frown, but I find them all the time. I can write you the wrong way, but you gotta read my mind. Won't you read my mind? Won't you read my mind?